Chapter 1. The Foggy Night. Fog blanketed East London like a gray, oppressive curtain so thick that the dim street lights were reduced to faint, flickering specks. Inside the Rusty Anchor, a small pub tucked away on a narrow cobblestone street, the warmth from an old fireplace clashed with the bone-chilling cold outside. The crackling of burning logs mingled with the raucous laughter of regular patrons, creating a chaotic symphony for Sophia Evans. Sophia, 25, stood behind the bar, her trembling hands shaking slightly as she poured a pint. Her tight black uniform was frayed at the edges, but she maintained a neat appearance. Her brown hair tied up high, revealing sharp cheekbones, and gray-blue eyes that always glinted with a weary edge. Tonight was an extra shift, the only thing keeping her and her younger sister Mia afloat through this harsh winter. Their mother had died of lung disease 3 years ago, leaving the two sisters in a rundown apartment with medical debt. Their father was a faceless mystery, a man who'd abandoned them before Sophia was even born. The pub door suddenly swung open, ushering in a gust of icy wind. Sophia looked up, her breath catching as a man stepped inside. He was tall, with a calm demeanor that stood out against the rough regulars. His long black overcoat, damp with mist, clung to a solid frame. His eyes, a deep melancholic green, instantly drew her in. He sat near the fireplace, quietly watching the flames. Sophia felt her heart skip a beat. There was something about him, a stillness, a discreet loneliness that made it impossible for her to look away. "1 pint of Guinness," he said, his voice low and clear, carrying the hint of an upper-class English accent. She nodded, pouring the beer with hands clumsy from the cold, then brought it to his table. "Thanks," he said, glancing up at her briefly, just long enough for their eyes to meet. By midnight, only Sophia and the stranger remained. As she locked the door and prepared to turn off the lights, his voice cut through from the corner. "The fog's too thick. I'm afraid I can't go anywhere tonight." "You can stay here until the fog clears," she said. "I've got a small room behind the bar." "Thank you. I'm Alexander." "Sophia," she replied curtly, then led him through the old wooden door behind the counter. The small room had only a narrow bed, a little wooden table, and an ancient oil lamp. Alexander shed his overcoat, revealing an expensive gray suit underneath. They sat across from each other on the bed, the distance between them just enough to maintain separation, but not enough to dispel the strange tension growing in the air. "You don't seem like the type who comes here," Sophia said, breaking the silence. Alexander gave a faint smile. "I just got back from New York. 15 years there, but London's still home." "New York?" Sophia echoed, a hint of awe in her voice. "I've never left London. What's it like there?" "Beautiful, but lonely," he replied. "I went there to escape, but ended up feeling more lost." Sophia listened, sensing an invisible thread pulling her closer to him. "I've wanted to escape too," she said, her voice softening. "My mom died 3 years ago, leaving me and my sister. I work day and night so Mia can go to university." Alexander looked at her, his eyes softening. "You're stronger than you realize, Sophia." They kept talking, from small things to deeper scars. Alexander spoke of his younger brother, who died in a car accident 15 years ago, a memory that drove him to leave England. "Sometimes I think it was my fault," he said, his voice rough. "I was driving that night." Sophia placed her hand on his. "Don't keep blaming yourself," she said. "Sometimes life doesn't give us a choice." In that moment, the space between them shrank. Alexander looked up, his gaze locking onto hers. He leaned in slowly, and Sophia didn't pull back. When his lips met hers, it was gentle at first, then fierce. They fell onto the narrow bed, his hands threading through her hair, their breaths mingling in the cramped space. That night, amid London's fog and cold, they forgot their loneliness. The next morning, when Sophia woke, the bed was empty. Alexander was gone. No goodbye, except for a small silver pen engraved with "Ah" lying on the floor. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the letters, her heart heavy. Chapter 2. Traces in the Fog. 2 months had passed. Inside a dilapidated apartment, Sophia sat hunched on a rickety wooden chair, her trembling hands clutching a pregnancy test. 2 red lines stood out starkly. That morning, at a cheap clinic in Bethnal Green, a doctor had confirmed what she couldn't believe. She was pregnant with quadruplets. Very rare, the elderly doctor had said, but dangerous. You need to eat well, rest plenty, or neither you nor the babies might make it. Sophia had only nodded, her gray-blue eyes hollow. 4 babies, 4 lives she hadn't asked for, from a man she'd met just once, a man who'd vanished like the fog that morning. She kept it from Mia, her younger sister. Mia Evans, 19, was a literature student, always lost in a world of books and dreams. What Mia didn't know was the congenital heart defect she'd carried since childhood. Doctors had said it wasn't too severe, a small hole in her heart, manageable with a stress-free life and good health. "You're back," Mia's voice called, snapping Sophia out of her thoughts. She quickly hid the test and stood with a forced smile. "Yeah, just got back from the market," Sophia lied. Meanwhile, far from Sophia's slum, Alexander Harrow sat in a luxurious office in Canary Wharf. Harrow and Sons, the financial empire his father had left behind, was now his. A billion-pound dynasty he'd managed from the U.S. for the past 15 years. Alexander couldn't forget Sophia. Her smile, soft yet tinged with sorrow, haunted him. He'd left like a coward, afraid that if he stayed, he wouldn't be able to leave her. "I have to find her," he muttered. He called his personal assistant, Peter. "Find a girl named Sophia, works at the Rusty Anchor in East London." "Sir, East London's huge, and just a first name." "Find her," Alexander cut in. "Hire a detective if you have to." Back in East London, Sophia faced a brutal reality. A week after learning she was pregnant, she was sacked from the Rusty Anchor. "You're pregnant. You can't wait tables," the pub's owner said. She found new work soon after, a night cleaning shift at a supermarket. The job was grueling, but she had no choice. Each night, she mopped floors and hid her growing belly under an oversized coat. Her health crumbled. She ate little, slept less, but she didn't dare quit. Mia needed tuition money and heart medication. One evening, as Sophia dragged herself home, she found Mia on the sofa, pale and clutching her chest. "What's wrong with you?" Mia asked, her voice weak. "Are you ill?" "Don't worry about me." Sophia knelt beside her. "Have you taken your meds?" she asked urgently. "Yeah," Mia replied with a faint smile. "Don't worry." Alexander, meanwhile, made no progress in finding Sophia. The detective he'd hired reported. She quit the pub, didn't leave an address. East London's full of people like that. No names, no traces. One late night, Sophia trudged home after her shift, feet numb, mind spinning. Crossing a dark alley near home, a violent wave of dizziness struck. She collapsed onto the cold pavement. A passerby found her, shouting for an ambulance. "She's pregnant. Look. Hurry." Sophia was rushed to Whitechapel's NHS hospital, unconscious. The next morning, Alexander saw a small headline in the newspaper: "Pregnant woman with quadruplets hospitalized after collapse in East London." He read fast, each word stabbing his chest. No name, but instinct told him it was Sophia. He threw the paper down, grabbed his coat, and bolted from the office. "Get the car," he barked to his driver. "Take me to Whitechapel now." Chapter 3. Hospital Lights. Alexander stood at the end of the hospital corridor, his hands gripping the edge of his overcoat, his green eyes fixed on the emergency room door with palpable worry. The ER door swung open, and a woman in her 50s stepped out. Her name tag read Dr. Margaret Holmes. "Who are you?" she asked. "I think I know her," Alexander replied. "Is her name Sophia Evans?" Dr. Holmes raised an eyebrow. "Are you family?" she asked skeptically. "Not exactly," Alexander admitted. But I need to know how she is, please. Dr. Holmes sighed. Follow me, she said, leading him to a quiet corner. She's Sophia Evans, yes, pregnant with quadruplets, about 25 weeks, critical condition, severe anemia, malnutrition, and she collapsed from exhaustion. Alexander felt his head spin. Pregnant with quadruplets, he echoed, his voice trembling. He quickly calculated, 2 months since that night, at the Rusty Anchor. The timing matched perfectly. Those children might be his. Is she awake? Can I see her? He asked. Not yet, she replied firmly. What are you to her? I'm the one responsible, he finally said. I need to stay. If she needs anything, hospital bills, medicine, I'll cover it. Inside the ER, Sophia awoke to a vague ache. Her weak hands instinctively reached for her stomach, but her first thought was of Mia. Mia, she rasped, trying to sit up. Stay still, Dr. Holmes said. You collapsed on the street, nearly died from anemia. Sophia stared at the doctor with panic. 4. Are they still okay? She asked, her voice quivering. They're fine, but you're not, Dr. Holmes replied. There's a man outside asking to see you, says his name's Alexander. Do you know him? Sophia froze, her heart pounding. Alexander. His name hit her like a blade. No, she lied. I don't know him. Don't let him in. Outside. Alexander waited impatiently. When Dr. Holmes returned, she gave him an unreadable look. She doesn't want to see you, she said bluntly. Alexander nodded, feeling the sting. He deserved her coldness, but he couldn't leave. What does she need? He asked. Hospital bills, medicine, anything. I'll take care of it. Alexander scribbled a brief note. Sophia, I'm Alexander Harrow. I'm sorry I left. I didn't know about the babies, but I'm here now. I'll wait for you as long as it takes. He handed it to a nurse to deliver, then quietly paid the hospital fees. Sophia was discharged the next morning. As a taxi took her back to East London's slums, she found Mia on the sofa, pale and clutching her chest. Sis, Mia rushed to her, tears streaming down. Where were you all night? Sophia hugged her. I fainted, had to go to the hospital. Mia's eyes dropped to Sophia's stomach, widening. You're pregnant, she whispered. Why didn't you tell me? I can handle it, Sophia said, but Mia grabbed her hand. You don't have to do it alone. Someone named Alexander called, said he'd help. Sophia's voice sharpened. I don't trust anyone anymore, she said. But inside, a crack widened. Alexander's business card sat heavy in her coat pocket. Chapter 4. Climax in the stormy night. The storm crashed into East London like a snarling beast. 7 months had passed, and now Sophia's swollen belly was evidence of what had transpired. But tonight, her thoughts weren't on them. Every shred of her focus was on Mia, curled up on the threadbare bed, her face pale and lips tinged blue. Mia, how are you? Sophia knelt by the bed, her trembling hand pressing against her sister's forehead, hot, scorching. Mia coughed violently, and Sophia knew this wasn't just a common cold. Mia's heart defect had merged with a raging fever, turning into a lethal threat. I'm calling an ambulance, Sophia said, but her phone was dead, and the power was out from the storm. Sis, I'm so tired, Mia whispered, and Sophia felt her heart shatter. She pulled Alexander's business card from her coat pocket, dialing the number on the payphone in the hallway. Alexander, Sophia choked out, tears spilling down her face. I need you. My sister Mia. She's burning up. I can't afford to get her to the hospital. Please. Sophia. Alexander's voice sharpened. Where are you? I'm coming now. East London. The tenement on Brick Lane, she replied, her voice breaking. Hurry. Alexander bolted from his Mayfair apartment, grabbing only his car keys. The storm had snarled traffic, but he didn't care. He sped the Bentley through waterlogged streets, By the time he reached the tenement, it was nearly midnight. He charged up the stairs and pounded on Sophia's door. Sophia flung it open, her face ghostly white. "You're here," she whispered, but there was no time for more. She pointed to Mia, now unconscious on the bed, her breaths shallow. Alexander didn't hesitate, scooping Mia up. "We've got to get her to a hospital," he said. They rushed outside, Sophia staggering behind. The streets were flooded, and Alexander's Bentley was trapped. He carried Mia, running through the storm on foot, Sophia trailing. When they found shelter under an awning, Maya stopped breathing. Sophia screamed, lunging to hold her, but Alexander held her back, checking Maya's pulse with trembling hands. "No, no, no," Sophia sobbed, clutching her sister's cold body. "Why didn't you come sooner?" Alexander knelt beside her, rain mingling with tears on his face. "I'm sorry, Sophia," he said, his voice breaking. "I tried. I can't lose you too." He pulled her into his arms, letting her pound his chest, letting the rain soak them both. Amid this, Sophia suddenly clutched her stomach, screaming from a sharp, wrenching pain. "Alexander," she gasped. "I think I'm giving birth." Alexander panicked, lifting her and running through the downpour for help. An ambulance finally appeared, and they were rushed to Whitechapel Hospital. Sophia went into premature labor amid the storm. 4 tiny babies were born fragile, but 2, Rose and Charlie, didn't survive. Sophia screamed when she heard, her body trembling on the bed, clutching the 2 surviving babies, Emma and Oliver, as if terrified they'd slip away too. Alexander stood outside the delivery room, watching through the glass, tears falling silently. He saw Sophia cradling Emma and Oliver, sobbing uncontrollably. He wanted to go in, to hold her, but he stayed rooted, blaming himself for not doing more. Mia was gone. 2 babies were gone. Chapter 5. Ashes and Embers. The small house on the outskirts of London sat quietly along an oak-lined road, far from the flooded alleys and the storms howling that had taken Mia, Rose, and Charlie from Sophia. Alexander Harrow had bought it days after the tragedy, offering little explanation beyond. "You need a safe place for Emma and Oliver." Sophia didn't protest. She was too exhausted, too broken to argue, but she didn't thank him either. She simply stayed silent, her gray-blue eyes hollow like ashes after a fire. On her first day in the new house, Sophia sat curled in an old armchair by the fireplace, clutching Emma and Oliver tightly. The 2 babies, her surviving children, were so small she feared a strong breath might harm them. Emma, with soft light brown hair like silk, slept peacefully in her left arm. Oliver, his green eyes half open as if watching his mother, nestled in her right. They were all she had left after that night, after Maya stopped breathing in her arms, after Rose and Charlie slipped away before she could name them. Alexander stood in the corner of the room, watching quietly. He wore a plain gray sweater, a far cry from the expensive suits of their first meeting. He didn't know what to say to Sophia. Every apology felt meaningless against her suffering. He did what he could, mixing formula for Emma and Oliver, washing diapers by hand, and keeping the fire going. Sophia didn't look at him, didn't speak to him, but she didn't send him away either. A week passed in a heavy shroud of mourning. Alexander stepped away from Harrow and Sons. "I'm not coming back to the office for a long time," he told his assistant. Each night, when Sophia dozed off from exhaustion, Alexander stayed awake to tend to Emma and Oliver. He gently lifted them from her arms, placing them in a wooden crib he'd assembled. He sang lullabies he'd heard his mother sing to Thomas, his late brother, years ago. One evening, when Emma cried for milk, Alexander brought a bottle, but Sophia snatched it from him, her voice cold. "I can do it myself." After a long silence, Alexander spoke, his voice a whisper. "I had a brother, Thomas. He died because of me." Sophia looked up. "How did he die?" she asked, the first time she'd responded to him since the storm. "I was driving that night, 15 years ago," he began, his voice trembling. In Yorkshire, on a narrow road. It was pouring, the road slick, and I was going too fast. The car spun out, hit a tree. Thomas. He was next to me, just 18. He didn't make it. I survived, but I've never forgiven myself. I left England after that, ran away like I did with you. Sophia stared at him, her eyes blurring with tears. Do you think telling me it will make me forgive you for Maya? She asked, her voice quaking. No, Alexander replied. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I understand what it's like to lose someone you love. I couldn't save Mia, couldn't save Rose and Charlie, but I'm here for you, Sophia. I'm not going anywhere, even if you push me away. Time passed slowly, and Sophia's walls began to soften. She saw Alexander staying up to sing to the babies, his warm voice filling the silence. He'd given up everything, his job, his wealth, his Mayfair life, to be with her, asking nothing, demanding nothing. One night, as Emma and Oliver slept soundly in their crib, Sophia lay on the armchair, drifting into a dream. She saw Mia, Rose, and Charlie standing in a fog-draped field, a soft light illuminating their faces. Mia smiled and said, "Live for Emma and Oliver, sis. Don't be sad anymore." Sophia jolted awake, tears streaming down her face, and saw Alexander by the fireplace. She stood, walking toward him, her legs trembling. "Alexander," she whispered, her voice breaking. He looked up. "Sophia, what's wrong?" he asked, rising to steady her as she swayed. She didn't answer, just threw herself into his arms, sobbing. "Don't leave me. I can't take losing anyone else." Alexander held her tight, his tears falling into her hair. "I'm not going anywhere, Sophia," he whispered. "I swear I'll never leave you." They kissed, a slow but fierce kiss, like a flame flaring from the ashes of their painful days. Sophia felt his warmth, a safety she hadn't known since her mother's death. In that moment, they found each other amid the pain, a fragile yet powerful love sprouting from irreparable losses. That peace lasted a few days, but shadows from the past wouldn't let them rest. One afternoon, while Alexander was out, Sophia found her ex-boyfriend Tom at the door. He threatened to expose her and Alexander to the press, unless she paid him. When Alexander returned, she told him everything. "He won't stop," she said, her voice quivering. "He ditched me when my mom died, and now he's back to ruin me." Alexander took her hand, his eyes icy, but his voice gentle. "He won't touch you or the kids. I'll handle it." Alexander tightened security. He hired guards to watch the house, installed cameras, and reported Tom to the police. He knelt beside Sophia, holding her hand firmly. "I swear I'll keep this family safe," he said. "Do you trust me?" Sophia looked at him and nodded, her voice soft but certain. "I trust you." Chapter 6. Beneath London's Eternal Rain. 3 years passed. A gentle drizzle fell over the Thames, casting a delicate veil over the small house where Sophia and Alexander Harrow lived. Today was their wedding day, a quiet ceremony by the Thames, under a light drizzle and a hazy sunset. There were no throngs of guests, no lavish gown or extravagant feast. Just Sophia in a simple white dress, Alexander in a plain gray suit, and their children Emma and Oliver darting around them with radiant smiles. An elderly priest stood beneath a large umbrella, reciting brief vows. "Do you promise to stand by each other in wealth or poverty, in health or sickness, until death do you part?" Sophia nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks, mingling with the rain. "I do," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Alexander took her hand, his green eyes gleaming through the mist. "I do." By the riverbank, they placed a small granite memorial plaque engraved with the names Mita, Rose, and Charlie and the words, "Forever in our hearts." Emma and Oliver laid white daisies on it. Alexander had stepped away from Harrow & Sons 2 years ago, handing the billion-pound financial empire to a new management team to focus on his family. He founded a charity called Mia's Light, aiding London's orphans, inspired by Sophia's story. "I don't care about money or power anymore," he told her one night by the fireplace. "I just want us to live truly. For Mia, for Rose, for Charlie, and for Emma and Oliver." Emma and Oliver grew up healthy in the Riverside home. Emma, with her light brown hair and gentle nature, loved drawing and weaving tales of Aunt Mia she conjured from Sophia's memories. Oliver, with his playful green eyes and boundless energy, raced through the garden. They called Alexander Dad naturally, as if he'd always been their father. Each winter, they stood by the Thames, placing white daisies on the memorial for Mia, Rose, and Charlie. Emma and Oliver scampered nearby, their laughter ringing through the drizzle. Sophia leaned into Alexander, feeling his warmth. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" she asked softly. He kissed her hair, smiling. "No, but I knew from that rainy night you were all I'd ever need." One drizzly afternoon, the family gathered indoors, Alexander reading to Emma and Oliver by the fireplace, Sophia brewing tea in the kitchen. She smiled, knowing their love, born of an unexpected foggy night, had transcended tragedy and pain to become eternal under London's gray skies.